Hi guys, welcome to Multiverse. Some of you guys have been asking if I can make an electric DPS loadout. So tonight is the night. I'm going to use our friend again, Flash Fury. It's pretty much the loadout that I've been using quite for some time with this character. And full disclosure, I'm not really a DPS player. I usually play a controller, or in this case here, a healer. But once in a while when people ask me, I will switch to DPS, or if I play solo, I will switch to DPS. And this loadout has been working well enough for me in the past. There's probably a few things I should mention. The first thing is that I should probably have a Thistle Ball in the loadout, and I just can't use it. I hate using that power. And the other thing is that I'm always a bit torn between using Ionic Drain or not. Here in this case, the whole backbone of this loadout is pretty much using abilities that profit from enemies being electrified. So basically, you start with Arc Lightning, where you electrify enemies, and then all your other abilities will do extra damage thanks to enemies being electrified. There's Thistle Blast that I kind of like to use because of the very short cooldown. But I would be very tempted to use Ionic Drain. Ionic Drain would give you basically another ability to gain back some health. And also it's a finisher move. If enemies are below 35% health, the attack does extra damage. But Ionic Drain does not benefit from enemies being electrified. So that's why I'm going with Thistle Blast instead. I kind of like the fact that Ionic Drain replenishes life. But since it doesn't benefit from enemies being electrified, and since it has a somewhat longer cooldown, I kind of have a tendency to go with Thistle Blast instead. So let's go through the whole loadout, and then I'll show you each power individually. So basically, Arc Lightning is what starts the electric power interaction. That's what this loadout is actually benefiting from. It's benefiting from enemies being electrified, and it's benefiting from the power interactions between the powers. So you start with Arc Lightning, then there's Overcharge, there's a Circuit Breaker, there's Electrocute, there's Voltaic Blast, and there's a Thistle Blast. Again, I guess you could replace Thistle Blast with Ionic Drain if you really want to. And there is a Thistle Ball that I should probably fit in there somewhere in that loadout, maybe instead of Thistle Blast. I'll try to walk you through it in just a second. So let's start with Arc Lightning. Very simple, Arc Lightning does a bit of damage to your enemy, and it also replenishes life to the people in your group, and it makes enemies vulnerable to electric power. It electrifies enemies, making them vulnerable to electric powers. So as you see, it lasted for a bit. Let's try again. So right now, it's the sparring target is vulnerable to electric powers. Then we have Overcharge, which basically overloads your target with a whole bunch of electric damage. And Overcharge is one of those abilities that benefits from enemies being electrified. So basically, you electrify it with Arc Lightning, and then you hit them with Overcharge. And thanks to the enemy being electrified, Overcharge does extra damage. There's Electrocute. Electrocute basically summons a whole bunch of electric damage into an area. And you can see also in the power interaction, there's some electrified power interaction, or there's some polarized power interaction. Basically, electric powers have two types of power interaction. As you can see, electrified or polarized. I went with the electrified power interaction. I guess personally that's what I prefer. And here we have a Voltaic Blast. Oh, I forgot to show Electrocute. So basically, Electrocute summons a whole bunch of electric energy in an area. It lasts for quite a bit. And again, if you've cast Arc Lightning and made the enemies vulnerable to electric powers, then Electrocute will do a whole bunch of extra damage. And there's Voltaic Blast that basically calls down a bolt of electricity to strike your target. And again, as you can see, electrified enemy takes additional damage. So again, if you've used Arc Lightning first to make the enemy vulnerable to electric powers, then when you cast your ability, it will do extra damage. And last but not least, you have a Thistle Blast, which again, you hit your target with a bolt of electric damage, damaging it. And if the enemy is electrified, it does take additional damage. So again, if you've used Arc Lightning first to electrify the enemy, then you will do extra damage once you use your ability. And you can see the cooldown is really quick. So it's probably what I like a lot about this loadout. So let's give it a short try. Basically, you start the whole thing with Arc Lightning, then you'll go with all your abilities, and depending on the cooldown, you will cycle through your abilities. You don't have to use Arc Lightning every time, with every loadout, with every rotations. You can if you want to. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. But you could decide to, once your enemy is electrified, it gets electrified for about 12 seconds, I think. So what you could do during that time is that you could decide not to use Arc Lightning unless you really need to. Also, the thing I like is that Arc Lightning is multi-purpose. It does damage, it electrifies the enemy, and also it gives you back some health if you need it. And not just to you, but to you and I think it's pretty much everyone in your group or whoever's near you. So again, you electrify the enemy with Arc Lightning, and then you use your different abilities to do extra damage. It's pretty much that simple. And again, you don't have to use Arc Lightning with every rotation. You could decide to wait a bit until the power interaction is no longer working. It can be a bit tricky because obviously you see a whole bunch of lightning effects. But if you're not sure, you cast the Arc Lightning again. The only drawback, I guess, with this loadout is that it's a bit power hungry. But usually, when you're fighting enemies, especially mobs, by the time you're gone through 1 or 2 rotations, the enemies are done. So it's usually not an issue. And if you're in a group with a good controller, again, you should be able to spam through your powers, no problem. As I mentioned, I would be tempted to replace Thistle Blast with Ionic Drain. Let's show you what it does. The thing is, Ionic Drain will not benefit from enemies being electrified, but if enemies are below 35% health, Ionic Drain does benefit from doing extra damage, and also it does give you back life as well. So it's a pretty nifty ability, but you can see the cooldown is a bit longer with than with Thistle Blast. But and since you already have Arc Lightning also give you back health if you need it. So if you truly need health, you can spam Arc Lightning a bit. But you could also use Ionic Drain if you want even more extra life. So I would be tempted to use it in certain cases. It's kind of hard to tell. So I guess you decide. Either you go with Ionic Drain, or you go with Thistle Blast. There's also Thistle Ball that you probably should use, I suppose. The thing is, I'm not too crazy about that ability. I'll show you why. It's not unlike Time Bomb. You cast it and you see this ball of energy that comes down. Unlike Time Bomb, it does damage as it goes down. You don't have to wait for it to explode and do a whole bunch of damage. But it's a very slow ability. So I don't really like it for 2 reasons. First, it seems really slow, and it also breaks my rhythm with this character, if it makes sense. But it does benefit from enemies being electrified. So I probably should use it, but somehow I don't. So this is pretty much the loadout I use. So again, basically all I really do is that I benefit from power interactions, from the electrified power interaction. So you electrify enemies, and then you do a whole bunch of damage to them. It's pretty much that simple. So overall, it's a pretty simple loadout to use. Oh yeah, I forgot to show you Circuit Breaker. And now let's recharge our supercharge a bit to be able to show you a circuit breaker. So as you see, my supercharge bar is about half full, and I can cast the supercharge once. So if I had a full supercharge, I would be able to cast the supercharge twice, but there would be a cooldown between. You cannot just spam it. There's a cooldown when you cast it. So let's show you what it actually does. Sadly, it's pretty much as simple. You see a character that's flashing. Basically, while it's flashing, it will be protected against control effect, and you're supposed to be able to do extra damage while the character is flashing. Sadly, it doesn't last all that long, although in combat it might last a bit longer. Sadly, when you fight the combat dummies, it's not quite the same as when you're in combat in the open world or in missions. So some of the abilities don't quite work like they should. But roughly, as you saw, the supercharge makes your character glow, and while you're glowing, you're protected against control effects, and you should do extra damage. And that is pretty much it for now. So basically, guys, this is a very simple loadout to use, and all it really does is that it benefits from electric power interactions. So again, you electrify enemies, and then you cycle through your loadout as needed, and pretty much all your abilities should benefit from enemies being electrified. So that's pretty much it for now, guys. If you have any questions, feel free to ask so in the comment section down below, and I'll see what I can do about answering your questions. So as always, guys, thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.